But right now, we are joined by the one, the only friend of the show, national NBA insider and reporter for Clutch Points, Brett Siegel, joins us fresh off his Siegel Scoops. Brett, thank you so much for joining us on short notice.
Hey, no problem. I don't have anything for you.
Let's start here, Brett, as we were talking baseball. Obviously, the A's out here in Sacramento now, and we have a bunch of Giants fans. So I'm in the middle of spending some time talking baseball, and we see the post from NBA Central who links us to what you had to say. And the first thing I see is the T word, trade, with Domantas Sabonis. So that kind of got the ball rolling here. When I mentioned it on the air, a couple people reached out on the text line and on social media and said, hey, is this different, if you will, to what Sam Amick said via The Athletic a couple weeks ago when he talked about the clarity that Domantas Sabonis is seeking? So that's the first question I wanted to ask you. Is there anything else that you're hearing? Because Sam Amick didn't necessarily use the T word and say trade. He just said clarity. So I just wanted to ask, is there anything else that you're hearing, or is there just more rumblings of that same idea?
Well, we can't escape the aggregators online, right? They always have everything as soon as you put something out.
Yes.
So, and then it becomes viral and all that. So for clarity and to go off of what you were saying with Sam Amick's report, the Kings are heading in a weird direction right now. And I think that you guys know that out there. You've seen it since the De'Aaron Fox trade. We saw it this past week in the front office with Wes Wilcox leaving. And there's really not a sense of direction here where you have Domantas Sabonis under contract, that long-term deal. It's just finishing up year one of that deal. You have Zach LaVine under contract long-term now. DeRozan still has 2 more years left on his deal. So what is this team going to be? Because right now you're fighting for the 9 or 10 seed and a matchup in the first round with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I'm not sure if there's anybody out there that really believes that if the Kings were to make the playoffs, they have what it takes to beat the Thunder. So now you're heading into an offseason where you lost again in the first round or missed the playoffs. You just lost De'Aaron Fox. You're not really going to have the opportunity to add one of these great players through the draft lottery. You're not going to be able to add a Cooper Flagg or one of those top guys. So what's next for them? Is there a path forward through free agency? Well, there's not any stars available. It's all mainly role players. And now you have to go back to that dreaded T word. You have to go to the trade market. And what's going to be available there? This team, with the way it's constructed, they don't necessarily have the money to go out and get another big name player because they don't want to be a tax team. They don't want to be a first apron team next year. And you already have LaVine, Sabonis, DeRozan under contract. You don't have the ability to then add another big name player like you had with De'Aaron Fox. So now the question becomes, well, are you going to restructure this roster? Are you going to look to move guys around? And that's really what the players and Domantas Sabonis in particular are looking for at this time. They want clarity and a vision of, okay, well, what direction are we going as a franchise? Is Monte McNair the long-term committed GM of this franchise, or are they going to go in a different direction there? Who's going to be the head coach? And I think that these are all questions that the Kings are going to have to answer in the offseason. And obviously, they're going to have to provide to Domantas Sabonis. Otherwise, he's getting up there in age now. He's 28. He's in the prime of his career, playing some of the best basketball that we've seen. Is it worth him staying in Sacramento to the end of his current contract if there is no sense of direction and they aren't going to be a playoff team?
Talking to Brett Siegel, national NBA insider and reporter for Clutch Points. You can check out Siegel's Scoops on Clutch Points, and that's what we're breaking down right now as we discuss Domantas Sabonis and the future of him and the Kings. Brett, this is kind of a broader one. How is the league viewing the Kings right now and their plan? Most times when you trade your big star, you just decide, hey, you do the Blazers thing. We're just going to build this thing from the ground up. And obviously the Blazers have a couple vet pieces there, but they move off a Dame. Hey, we're going to hit the reset. The Kings try to do this. I've been calling it a Spark Notes version or a shortcut of it. How is that being viewed by the league? And we'll talk about Taylor Jenkins a bit later, but how are the Kings viewed by the league right now?
Right now they're viewed as a declining franchise. And it's kind of sad to say because just 2 years ago, you had the coach of the year, you had all the hype surrounding the Beam era with the Kings and all this hype surrounding the team that they were going to be the next best thing in the Western Conference, kind of what we saw previously with the Memphis Grizzlies, how they really rose with John Moran. They were labeled to be that next West contender. And now, obviously, we've seen the decline of both those organizations. The Sacramento Kings barely clinging on to a play-in tournament spot right now. And there's no guarantee that they're going to make the play-in tournament at this rate. They're a half a game, I believe, over the Dallas Mavericks, who just got Anthony Davis back. They're playing better basketball as of late. You have the Phoenix Suns, who are motivated to get in. So maybe the Kings even slip out of that and they don't make the playoffs entirely. So there's just a lot of questions surrounding this team right now, which is why there's rival organizations both in the West and the East looking at this team as being one that's going to be a big seller again at the trade deadline next season. And the reason for that is because you look at the timelines of the players on their roster, nothing really matches up. I mean, obviously Levine and Sabonis, 30 and 29 years old respectively, but DeMar DeRozan's getting older. He's going to be 36 at the start of next season. And Keegan Murray, he's going to be entering the final year of his rookie contract. And what's the decision there? Because if you extend Keegan Murray long-term and give him all that money, now you're really tying yourself down to the point where you can't even go out in the trade market and make a big deal unless you're dealing a guy like DeMar DeRozan or Domantas Sabonis. So there's just a lot of question marks right now. Nobody really has answers. And until we see what happens with this front office in the offseason, there's not really a sense of clarity around the league of what direction the Kings are heading in.
When you bring up all these things, Brett, the number one thing I'm thinking about as we break all this down is that somebody has to make these decisions. And what Wes Wilcox, who I said goodbye to yesterday, the last game in Sacramento, as he heads off to Utah, what comes to mind is Monte McNair. You know, a lot of people have said when you make a move like what the Kings did and you move off of Mike Brown and you move off of De'Aaron Fox, for lack of a better term, this is his mess, so you're not going to bring in a new GM to clean it up. That's how some people see it. What do you think the chances are, especially now with Wes Wilcox leaving during the season, what are the chances that Monte McNair gets to, quote-unquote, clean this mess up, or do you think the Kings move in a different direction?
I think he's certainly on the hot seat, and that's kind of the feeling of other teams around the league right now, of that the Kings are kind of exploring the routes of, well, what's our future going to look like, and is McNair the guy to see that through? And with Wes Wilcox leaving, a lot of that kind of played a role there, where the front office was under a lot of pressure from ownership and the higher-ups in the organization to really get the job done and to move De'Aaron Fox to have a vision moving forward. So when you ask the question of, well, what does this vision look like and what kind of timetable are we looking at with this front office? It's more of a sense of where Mike Brown was entering the season, where things were good, but we kind of had a sense and an inkling that if things didn't go well, he was going to be gone. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at right now with Monte McNair and the Kings front office, where if they enter next season and they're not able to pull off a big move in the offseason, they don't have a clear vision in place heading towards the trade deadline, and they're slacking in the West, I think that you're going to see an immediate change there. But I think that you're going to see ownership and the Kings organization really back Monte McNair a lot, really back some of these decisions. And obviously we've seen Vlade Divac has been around the organization a lot. I know Sam Amick talked with you guys about that recently, and he's been appearing more. I think that you're going to see him step more into an advisor role. You're going to see Alvin Gentry have more hands-on role here. So it's going to be a collective of guys really stepping up in the absence of Wes Wilcox, because he was one of the leading voices in that front office. Granted, he wasn't the title of general manager, but he held a lot of responsibilities that would normally fall on Monte McNair. So we'll see what happens here with Monte McNair now, because I think that it's a very interesting and unique situation where they could wind up moving off of him in the middle of the season.
Talking to Brett Siegel, national NBA insider and reporter for Clutch Points. Brett, when it comes to who the Kings might move, we already talked about Domantas Sabonis. A name that keeps coming up and out here, the consensus is that DeMar DeRozan will probably want out, being that elder statesman. He wants to play some meaningful basketball. He clearly still has it, but you need to put him in specific areas of the game. And right now he's just maybe doing too much on the Kings. Does it feel like he's probably the easiest option to move for the Kings? $24 million, 36 years old, but obviously can still score at a high level. Because I'm thinking, and I was looking at the Lakers and the Clippers because he's from the LA area. Okay, at 24 mil for a six-man, I think someone would do it, but I don't know. It kind of feels like people are overstating how easy it's going to be to move DeMar. Am I off on this, or do you think it'll be pretty easy?
I agree with that statement that you just said to an extent, where it's not going to be as easy as people are making out to be, where, yeah, he's only making 23, 24, 25 million, But when you compare him to a guy like Domantas Sabonis, Sabonis would be a lot more easier to move because there's going to be a lot more interest out there for a guy that can do a little bit of everything at the center position. He can play like that Jokic role, that hybrid role where he's a passer, rebounder, scorer, really anything you need of him, and he can play in the perimeter or the low post. So you can really build around him. You can build your offense around him. For DeRozan at his age, he's really kind of a guy that if there's a contending team out there that wants another second or third scorer, yeah, he makes sense for them. But what team's going to want to commit that money to him and move, let's say, and in the case of the Lakers, a guy like Rui Hachimura, for example? Why would the Lakers want to get off of a versatile defender and wing like that for a guy like DeMar DeRozan? So those are the big questions that will be answered a lot in the offseason. Obviously, it's just all speculation now. Okay, who can become available? What's the organization going to be looking to do? There's no definitive information saying like, yes, the Kings are going to be looking to move off DeRozan, and yes, DeRozan is going to be looking for a trade. That hasn't been presented at this time, much like the whole situation of, well, does Domantas Sabonis want out? That hasn't been presented at this time either. It's just more of figuring out the direction of the franchise. If that doesn't happen, frustrations continue to mount. He will eventually be looking at his future, and his future will eventually lead outside of Sacramento. But this offseason, let's say they are able to figure some things out. They bring in a bunch of key secondary guys, which I think that's most likely the direction that we're looking at here with the Kings, especially in a free agent class that's going to be loaded with those secondary mid-level exception type guys. Let's say they can bring in 2-3 impact players. All of a sudden, that changes the complete trajectory of your team because you don't need necessarily De'Aaron Fox. You don't need one of those big name players at the point guard position to be successful. You can have Domantas Sabonis and scorers like DeRozan, Monk, and Levine and surround them with solid bench play. And all of a sudden you have one of the deepest rosters in the Western Conference. So I think that that's really the unique aspect of this offseason, not just for Sacramento, but every organization is with the money going up across the league and the cap situations rising a little bit. Teams have a little bit more flexibility between the tax, between the apron lines. How are they going to use their mid-level exceptions? And how are they going to fill out the rest of their roster? Because that 10th or 11th guy on your bench can really make a big difference in terms of making a playoff push in a very loaded Western Conference.
Brett Siegel, one more before we get you out of here. Just a quick one. Obviously, the news on Taylor Jenkins with the Grizzlies. Do you have any information on what happened there? And do you think that maybe changes how the Kings look at Doug Christie and the job that he's done? I know that they've invested a lot and they like Doug Christie, but any information on Taylor Jenkins and what the interest level may be with the Kings or either way on both sides?
I don't know anything about a connection of Taylor Jenkins to Sacramento. Could it be a thing? Potentially. Obviously, those conversations will be held in the offseason. And like you mentioned, they do like Doug Christie, and I can concur. I've heard the same there, and that he has the backing of the locker room as well. And that's going to be the most important factor for the Kings is whatever head coach they wind up hiring, whether it's Doug Christie or somebody else, he's going to have the backing of the whole locker room, starting with Domantas Sabonis. And that's going to be the most important piece there. In terms of the Grizzlies, I wasn't necessarily this move was shocking in terms of the time that it came out because there are 8-9 games left in their season. They're battling for a top seed in the Western Conference. Very odd time for you to fire your head coach. Am I surprised by the news, though? No, I'm not. And because they changed his entire coaching staff last offseason, they've batted heads with Taylor Jenkins over the last year about changing their scheme around John Morant, having Desmond Bane take on a bigger role. And obviously, we've seen it this year with some of the players where they've been batting heads with the coaching staff and they've been frustrated at times with their roles on the court. We saw Desmond Bane and Santi Aldama a few games ago get into it on the bench, shoving each other and yelling. So this was just a major disconnect and something needed to change. And I've been told that this was a decision that Zach Kleiman, the GM, directly made himself with the backing of ownership and the others in the front office. And they spoke with Taylor Jenkins this morning and had a face-to-face conversation about that. So Taylor Jenkins out in Memphis and obviously going to change a lot of landscape in the Western Conference, and certainly for Jenkins, who now becomes the best head coach available in what could be a pretty underwhelming coaching carousel this offseason. But hey, you never know. That we always see big name coaches get fired, and this was certainly one of them.
Brett, thank you so much for joining us. As always, Brett Siegel, national NBA insider and reporter for Clutch Points. Brett, enjoy your weekend if you even get any of those. I know you're always running around, and 'tis this season as the NBA comes to a close. We will talk to you soon. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alan.
That was Brett Siegel. Be sure to check out Siegel's Scoops on Clutch Points, and that breaks down everything that he has to say about Domantas Sabonis and the possible trade